All right, so we're looking here and we see some shadows, and those shadows are gradual and soft-edged. So this is what's called soft-edge duotone. But you can see a faint hard edge there. That's because I also have the hard one showing. So when I turn that off, it's all soft-edged. And now my unicorn looks more cuddly. And you can do that through dodging and burning, or you can do it by taking your hard edge duotones and using the filter of Gaussian blur and controlling how blurry it gets. So I have to decide what do I like, and I like blending it. This is my dodge and burn. Blending it with this. I can just do it with dissolve and opacity, but I could also do it, if I want to make it more extreme, I can do things like overlay, or pin light, soft light. You know, these are all ways to kind of mix the colors for my soft edged. But I lose a lot of the texture that way, so I'm just going to do it on dissolve, and I'll just take the percentage down a little bit more. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good for the soft edge solution. So now I'm going to take both of those. Shows how complex these coloring sandwiches could get. I'm going to put them in a group, and I'm going to call that group duotone soft edge, because you usually want to choose one or the other. And these are just the shadows. So what does that mean? I have duotone hard edge shadows. I have duotone soft edge shadows. I have not lightened the flat colors yet. So next, I'm going to duplicate my flat color again. I'll make my duotone hard edge or soft edge shadows red. And I'm going to merge it. Might have to unlock it first. Nope, I don't. Okay. And now I'm going to brighten this to get duotone highlights. So adjustment levels, and then I move it to the left. And it brightens it. And I can limit the shadows. And you can see how now those flames, those reds, those finally start to lighten. And now when you see my duotone hard shadows at 100% on top of my duotone highlights, right? You can see how it splits my local color into highlights and shadows, and now that's pretty extreme duotone. Like cue the heavy metal soundtrack. But I can always soften it, so I'm going to call these duotone highlights. And by doing it in this way, I don't need to do them separately for hard and soft. They work for both. So you see that those highlights also affect my duotone soft edge color. Make sense? So I have duotone highlights for everything, which is just a lightened version of my flat color. And then I have duotone hard edge shadows. And then I have duotone soft edge shadows. And I should choose which one I like better. And you can see I've made it pretty drastically different here. So we can do kind of a class vote, but let me do my favorite trick, which is to set this to dissolve and set it down in opacity a little bit, and set the highlights to dissolve, set them down in opacity a little bit. All right, so it's either going to be this, that's hard-edged. Raise your hand if you like that, or it's going to be this, the soft-edged. All right, so we want it to look a little edgier, not so cuddly, right? And I can also try dissolve here and get a little bit of them to mix. But yeah, so this gives me all these options. And actually that's pretty effective. Now you can also check it on different backgrounds, right? So to me that looks a little washed out, so I like it A little bit of those deeper tones back in there. But you can still see the hard edges coming through. And then I'll make this one even less. This is the one that was dodged and burned, so it's softening it the most. So yeah, how about there?
I think there's some really spots in the bounce still.
That's going to be okay. Yeah, and we're not finished with coloring. I also don't love how the offset is there, and there's a little extra dot there that the offset is doing. So there's little things that could be tweaked, but this is good for duotone coloring. So I'm going to save it. So we like the hard edge duotone. I'm just using the soft edge to moderate it just a little bit, right? Just a tiny bit. Okay, so save. The next step, if we look at our primer here on digital coloring, the lemon, now we have made it all the way to the dotted line. This is typical digital coloring. Goes about that far. It's probably about 80% of the digital coloring you'll see out in the wild. So when we break this border, we get into what I call special effects. Kind of special circumstance coloring. This is all duotone soft edge. That's all pretty standard. Okay, but when we get to, and when you see it in the world, this is duotone hard edge. When you see it in animation, this is all just duotone hard edge. And duotone hard edge was, before 1990, limited to these colors, right? You can see all the color codes that had to be put in for where the shadow colors were versus the highlight colors. And so what was the big job of colorists? They had to define what shapes would have what colors, and they had to actually define those shapes if the penciler didn't do it. Okay, and then this is soft edge duotone. This is soft edge duotone. You can notice the difference between this started to be with digital color printing after 1990, because you have clay-coated paper and you can print at higher resolution and thus more color range. This is what it looked like on newsprint, and newsprint doesn't have a solid white. Newsprint itself is kind of gray, so that mixes into all the colors. I actually like the vintage look, but now we have a bigger color range available, and that allows for these kind of special effects. So full spectrum color, like a Matisse painting, is when in the local color of like the skin tone or the orange leotard, this was the flat color of it, right? You have not just variations of light and dark versions of that local color, you also have other colors. And this gets into color temperature theory. So you can see that there's purples and pinks along with the skin color, right? And that in the orange, there's also yellows and reds and browns. Those are different spectrums of color. So looking at Wonder Woman and her kind of primary colors, when she's colored in full spectrum, look how her skin has purples, pinks, and yellows in it, right? Look how the sword has, well, the sword is basically blues, but the cheeks are kind of pinker, the forehead is more yellow. This uses this really nice gradation between the yellow and the purples and the pinks that kind of wash into everything. And then this comes from kind of watercolor techniques, where the Wonder Woman figure in this panel is all just duotone soft edged, but the monster is done with full spectrum color. So on the kind of green scales, you have yellow, you have pink, you have orange, you have brown, all these different colors. You have blues kind of mixing in. So full spectrum can be tricky to do well. And when it's done well, it's usually fairly subtle. Like notice how his shirt has bluish shadows, but yellowish highlights. Or how Hellboy's skin here has all these different spectrums of red and purple and orange to give it that dimension. But it can also be done a little bit more heavy-handed, like how Batman will be shown with oranges and grays and purples, or how the hull of this ship goes from bright yellow through oranges and reds into deep purples, all with the same local color of wood. Right? And this often happens in gradients. So fuller color usually means thinner line art, right? So on these more full spectrum color examples, notice how thin the lines are. They leave a lot of room for the color because the color is showing the lighting. Whereas the flatter the color, the simpler the color, like my favorite colorist, Dave Stewart on Mike Mignola's stuff, if you did full spectrum on that, it would just be a mess because the inking is showing all the lighting. So if you have really thin lines, maybe you want to do more dimensional color. So I guess I need to talk about full spectrum on our example before we move to color holds. So how do I do this? So my color solution here is now made up of a few things, right? It is the flat color underneath. It is the duotone highlights. It is the duotone hard edge color, and it is the duotone soft edge, like just at a really low opacity. Okay? All of those things are needed. My color reference is no longer really needed. So how do I play with those? I'm going to select them all, duplicate all of them. I have to unlock my, actually I don't need to do the flat color because I have that at 100%. Oh no, I didn't, I did it at 68. So yeah, I have to unlock this. All of these are making up my sandwich. And yet all of these are kind of the most basic sandwich still. So this is like a BLT, right? Like the basic ingredients of flat color, of duotone hard edge, duotone soft edge. So I'm going to hit Command J, that will copy all of them, and then I'm going to merge those into a group. And then I'm going to right click and merge that group so it's one layer with all my coloring. And then I'm going to lock these again and turn them off. Right, so you can see that all those decisions are now merged. And when you merge, you can see how subtle that dissolve is once it actually is used. And so that's my flat, or that's my duotone color, right? Mostly hard edge. Now, how do I turn this into full spectrum? I do it by doing this. I use my paint bucket, but instead of the paint bucket, I use the tool that's on top of it. And it's called the gradient tool. Now there's a few ways I can do it. I can just paint a gradient like purples. And I'll do one like this. And then I just paint just like that, right? Now that didn't work the way I wanted because these settings are not where I want them. But I can basically kind of paint over and then cut it out. Why is it not showing the full gradient? Let's look at those settings. That's really odd. Okay. So I'm going to cancel. I'm going to show you another way to do it without the gradient tool directly. Because the problem with using the paint bucket gradient is that it replaces all of your colors, right? And then you would overlap those with what's underneath it. So the better way, in my opinion, is to use the layer style gradient. So you double click. This is now on a combined layer of all your colors. And you do gradient overlay. And then you click on it, just like you do for stroke, and you're going to pick your gradients. So if I do purples again, and I find the one I want, there we go. It's going to look a little bit more like what I expected, right? And I can, of course, alter this gradient and make it do anything I want. I can add any color I want. I'll add a color in. Let's throw something out of left field there. And let's throw something here that's... So this is very rainbow. This is just to show you the full extent of full spectrum, right? Okay, now I hit OK, and I can change the angle of it here, right? And I can change the scale of it here. Like how much does it spread across my image? And I can change it, though I wouldn't for this, I can change it to be radial. I could change it to be angled. I can change it to be diamond, or I can change it to be reflected, right? Now reflected could kind of work. It just doubles it up on both sides, right?